Direct News TV. June 25, 2023. Russia-Ukraine war crisis shows real cracks in Russia, U.S. Russia's crisis involving the Wagner Group's aborted revolt against the Kremlin has exposed real cracks in President Vladimir Putin's authority, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says. China says it supports Russia in protecting national stability, in Beijing's first official remarks on the short-lived armed uprising. Ukraine leader says discussed Russia events with Biden. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he has discussed the recent events in Russia and long-range weapons with the United States leader. I spoke with U.S. President Joseph Biden. A positive and inspiring conversation, Zelensky tweeted. We discussed the course of hostilities and the processes taking place in Russia. Canada's Trudeau says he discussed Russia's situation with Zelensky. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he has discussed the security situation in Russia with Zelensky. Volodymyr, Canada is committed to standing with Ukraine and providing Ukrainians with the support they need, Trudeau wrote on Twitter. Ukraine's defense minister on Russia turmoil, things moving in right direction. Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov says he has discussed the turmoil in Russia in a phone call with his United States counterpart, describing the Russian authorities as weak and saying things were moving in the right direction. In a brief readout of the call with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Reznikov said they also discussed Ukraine's counteroffensive and steps to strengthen Ukraine's armed forces. We agree that the Russian authorities are weak and that withdrawing Russian troops from Ukraine is the best choice for the Kremlin, Reznikov wrote on Twitter. Wagner revolt shows divisions in Russian camp, Macron. The revolt by the Wagner mercenary group against Putin over the war in Ukraine has revealed divisions within the Russian leadership, French President Emmanuel Macron has said. The abandoned march on Moscow shows the divisions that exist within the Russian camp, and the fragility of both its military and its auxiliary forces, Macron told the Province newspaper, saying the situation is still developing and he was following the events hour by hour. All bets are off, an uncertain future after Wagner mutiny. Following Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin's short-lived mutiny, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his government find themselves in uncharted territory. The crisis appears to have been averted, for now, but what happens next for Russia and the Wagner Group remains uncertain. All bets are off, Keir Giles, a senior consulting fellow of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, told Al Jazeera on Sunday. It could leave Russia weaker for years, U.S. lawmakers weigh in on Wagner mutiny. Republican Representative Don Bacon, a former U.S. Air Force general who sits on the House Armed Services Committee, told NBC that the weekend turmoil could leave Russia weaker for years, calling it a benefit to neighboring countries including Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. It would be different if Putin was wanting to be a peaceful neighbor. But he's not, Bacon said. House of Representatives Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner has said Putin's future actions in Ukraine could be inhibited by Prigozhin's assertion that the rationale for invading Ukraine was based on lies concocted by the Russian top brass. Taking down the very premise makes it much more difficult for Putin to continue to turn to the Russian people and say, "We should continue to send people to die," Turner told CBS Face the Nation program. U.S. Senator Ben Cardin said the weekend turmoil in Russia does not ease Washington's need to continue aiding Ukraine as it launches its long-awaited counteroffensive against Russia. This is a critical time for Ukraine. This counteroffensive is going to be defining as to where we're going to be in the next year or two, Cardin, a Democrat who sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, told Fox News. So, it's incredibly important that we maintain our support and not be fooled by what's happening in Russia today as to the needs of the Ukrainians. Turkish President, NATO chief discussed developments in Russia over phone. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg in a phone call have discussed the latest developments in Russia, according to a statement by the Communications Directorate. During the call, it was pointed out that the end of tensions in Russia prevented the occurrence of irrevocable humanitarian tragedies in the Ukrainian field, the statement said. It was conveyed to Stoltenberg that Turkey hopes recent developments in Russia will be a new milestone in the path to a just peace in Ukraine, it added. Putin consistently misled on state of war, former Polish FM. Answering the question as to how vulnerable Putin is, former Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski has told Al Jazeera the Russian president is a classic case of a leader in his third decade in power. He invaded Belarus because he believed in his own propaganda, his very weird czarist and communist reading of history and some pretty wacky theorists of international relations and geopolitics, and it looks like he's been consistently misled as to the state of his forces and the state of the war, Sikorski said. He's already had to limit his objectives. Remember, at first he wanted to take over all of Ukraine and now I guess, he wants to rescue something, anything from this disaster so that he can stay in power. I think his situation is getting worse. Vilnius urges beefed up NATO if Prigozhin in Belarus. Lithuania's president has warned that if Belarus is to host Prigozhin, then NATO will need to strengthen its eastern flank. The head of state, whose Baltic country neighbors both Belarus and Russia and will host next month's NATO summit, spoke after a State Security Council meeting to discuss Wagner's aborted revolt against the Kremlin. After Prigozhin called off his troops' advance on Saturday, Moscow said the Wagner chief would leave Russia for Belarus and would not face charges. If Prigozhin or part of the Wagner group ends up in Belarus with unclear plans and unclear intentions, it will only mean that we need to further strengthen the security of our eastern borders, Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda told reporters. I am not only talking about Lithuania here, but without a doubt the whole of NATO, he said. Erdogan tells NATO Sweden must stop Kurdish protests. Sweden must stop protests by supporters of outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, in Stockholm to get a green light on its NATO membership bid, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has told NATO's Secretary-General in a phone call. Erdogan told Stoltenberg that Turkey had a constructive attitude, but Sweden's change of terrorism laws to meet demands from Ankara was meaningless, while PKK supporters hold protests in the country, the Turkish presidency said in a statement. Wagner has bitten Putin in the backside, former Polish FM. Radoslaw Sikorski, former Polish foreign minister and member of European Parliament, has told Al Jazeera, Wagner was created by Putin and it's bitten him in the backside. Astonishingly audacious move by Prigozhin. I think he must have counted on some defections to him from the security service, from the army that didn't materialize, all he got was passivity, neutrality, Sikorski said. And he must have seen that there are some units being prepared to defend Moscow which must have weighed on his decision to stop. President Putin has been saying all along that the West is degenerate and will decompose and will lose the nerve and the will to support Ukraine. Well, it looks like Russia is not as solid as he was trying to persuade us. Putin, Lukashenko hold another call after thwarted mutiny. Putin and his Belarusian counterpart Lukashenko spoke by phone on Sunday morning, Belarus Belta news agency has reported. The two men spoke at least twice on Saturday. Many admit mutiny has dealt a blow to Putin's reputation, AJ correspondent. Al Jazeera's Yulia Shapovalova reporting from Moscow says while Russians continue supporting Putin as he controlled the situation, many admit the mutiny has dealt a blow to President Putin's reputation. Others say that Prigozhin is obviously a player in Vladimir Putin's political system and all he has, the funds, human resources, all the weapons, all that comes from the state, and he totally depends on Vladimir Putin, despite his rivalry with the Ministry of Defense. China says supports Russia in protecting national stability, Foreign Ministry. China says it supports Russia in protecting national stability, in Beijing's first official remarks on the short-lived armed uprising. As a friendly neighbor and a new era comprehensive strategic cooperative partner, China supports Russia in protecting national stability and achieving development and prosperity, the Foreign Ministry said in a statement, adding the issue was Russia's internal affair. Prigozhin unlikely to stay in Belarus for long, analyst. Franek Vyakorka, chief political advisor to Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, has told Al Jazeera that Prigozhin is unlikely to stay in Belarus for long. I think this was the solution which pleased both Putin and Prigozhin. On one hand, Putin did not want to kill Prigozhin because he's important, he's needed for the fight in Ukraine, and on the other hand Putin also didn't want to let him go and stay and do what he does, Vyakorka said. The problem is Prigozhin won't stay in Belarus for a long time. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.